into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Pod Damn America, the podcast for podcasts. I'm Jake Flores. That's Anders Lee wearing a bandana.
Anders Lee here, the podcaster for podcasts.
Really scraping the bottom of the well here.
What did you say? The podcast for
I just said the word
podcasts and
podcast like
podcasts.
100 times in a row. Um, I
Weird.
was trying to do a bit where I say something different at the beginning of the show, and then I was like, man, I don't really have one. I
A
kind of
lot of people do that. I have noticed that the longer somebody does a podcast, the more deranged their introductions get. Like, hey, this is Jake Flores or whatever. This is John Nobody, and it's like, I'm John Nobody. Like people,
Baudrillard, man, copy of a copy of a copy.
yeah.
We're completely divorced from the original thing anymore. Like much like the JD Vance memes, where he's like, we all recognize that it's a meme about JD Vance's face, but it looks nothing like him anymore. You know,
Mm-hmm.
or like Trump impressions. That's where we're at with this shit. Welcome to podcast, the podcast with a bunch of P's. What do you think of that? How about that one? We'll do that one this week. Podcast.
Papa cast.
Papa, better ingredients, better podcast. I'm an interesting place. I did mushrooms this weekend, so I cleaned my brain out. That's how I always think about that. It was always a nice afterglow the next day, so I'm having a nice lazy Sunday. I went to the uh, Pleasure Renaissance Fair here in Los Angeles, which is really interesting. It's
Do tell.
it's a Renaissance fair that has like back lore to it that essentially is there's a documentary about it. I haven't watched it yet. I want to check it out. It was fucking started by a bunch of swingers and shit and a bunch of weird kind of queer adjacent just like alt lifestyle people. And I mean, if you've ever been to a Renaissance fair, they kind of all have that going on. Like there's like a subtle vibe. Everything is very I don't know, just like friendly in a weird way.
Okay.
And it was an interesting experience because in the depths of this mushroom trip I went on, me and my friend Sarah, I think he's been on the show. I can't remember if she's been on the show. It's a long time, but I've been friends with her forever. Um, we went to see this fucking clown, and they have these clowns out here. This is like an LA thing. It's a weird rent fair thing. It's a lot of converging things. Um, but there are these clowns now that are like, I mean, you've been to clown school, like you know what clowning is.
Yeah.
It's kind of chaos magic-y. Like it kind of hypnotizes you what these people do. This guy came out and he just did a lot of like he didn't say words. He was doing a lot of whistling and just like and like you were kind of watching his facial expressions and his body language, and it's doing stuff to your brain, especially if you're on a lot of drugs. And this dude destroyed the fabric of the universe in my head. His name was Mooney.
Mooney.
Yeah, he was really interesting, and he just like he was grabbing people and bringing them up on stage and doing all this bizarre stuff. At one point, he looked directly at me and started yelling stuff at me and just doing like a lot of gibberish and like pointing to a thing, and I was so high. I was like, no, Mooney,
Because he
please.
knew you were high. Is that why he
Well,
selected you?
you know when you're high and you're like, if someone looks at you, you're like, they know I'm high. Like
Yeah.
that got amplified by a million times, and it's like he probably did it on purpose because a lot of these people, you know, if you talk to people out here in LA, it's like this thing that's adjacent to the comedy world now. Everyone takes a clown class and they fucking have some insane instructor who's like been meditating on this shit for hundreds of years. Is like, you know, shows you kind of like how to like communicate with like pre-language stuff,
Mm-hmm.
just gestures and body and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I mean, one of the things that I remember that really fucking really made it like apparent that we're like that made it work, I guess, really hard is you immediately realize if you get up and leave, he's gonna fucking get you. Like you're gonna become part of the bit, right? So you suddenly feel like, oh shit, you're kind of trapped. Like you're a little
Yeah.
like vulnerable.
He
But putting
can't
people,
walk anybody. That's the every comic's dream is that nobody can
well, but
leave.
like people in comedy audiences are already kind of like that, you know. Nobody wants to
Yeah.
sit in the front row. Everybody kind of knows that's what's going on. Like everyone kind of understands this stuff is happening anyway. So like I think he knows that. I mean, I'm just projecting because of the mushrooms, but like that puts you in a vulnerable space, which makes the show way more intense. Because if you can disconnect from a show as like an audience member, then it's not going to hit as hard. Which is why it like sucks to do comedy now because
Yeah.
people are on their phones and stuff, and everyone has one foot out the door, and like, but true performance like does like really grab people in this weird way where like feeling safe is going to take you out of it. So like if you are like, oh, if I get up, he's going to fuck with me, now you're fucking 100% engaged, and he's got like psychic control over you. And this clown, man, I mean, he destroyed the fabric of space and time,
Hmm.
and just fucking just laid waste. It's just bananas. At one point, he just got up on top of this fucking like board that was on top of like a can, like a tin can. It was like balancing on it, and he hadn't said anything for like half an hour, and then he just starts yelling about like capitalism. You know, like he was he was like an interesting, weird social commentary thing. It was just yelling about like, you know, if there's a bucket on the way out the door and you're gonna fucking pay me because like I'm a performer, you know, and it provided all this interesting context to it. So yeah, man, that's where my head's at right now. But it was but the fucking Renaissance Fair, you know, started by a bunch of swingers and stuff, and I was thinking about that a lot because my friend Sarah said something really interesting during the clown where she was like, you know what's kind of funny is like this is kind of edgy. There's kind of like some fucked up shit going on, but there's kids here and stuff, and there's like families and shit, and everyone knows that it's like a weird swingers thing, kind of. Or maybe they don't, but like I guess what like to actually have a point about this, like what I took away from it was like, you know, the right now the culture war narrative against us on like a social level is that anything queer adjacent, like trans people, especially, but like drag queens and stuff like that, is all on a fucking slippery slope towards like something dark, and that's
Mm.
why
Yeah.
the conservative thing is to be like, no, 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 maintain, be a Don Draper family. Even though rewatching Mad Men right now, it's so weird that people are like, yeah, return to that because it's all about how they're fucking miserable.
Yeah.
Like the show itself is like, this is not good. Like, don't return to this.
Right.
Um, but that Norman Rockwell imagery, like of like, you know, what the world is supposed to be and what it was before woke came along or whatever. The narrative is very much don't bring your kids to this sort of thing because these people are sick and they have, you know, all sorts of all their sexuality and stuff is fucked up and deviant and all this stuff, and uh realizing that like these people made a thing that's very wholesome. It has a lot of community to it. And a lot of these fucking clowns too at the end of their sets, they would do these speeches and shit about how like everyone is welcome here and stuff. After doing this insane chaos magic shit, be like fucking everyone is welcome. I don't give a fuck who you are. Um but like it kind of I don't this is probably the mushrooms talking, but like I kind of came away from it and I was like this is like a really positive thing to be doing right now because if you have that like creeping trad weird fucking evil thing in your head at all where you're worried scared of people like that and you believe on any level this inkling of fucking Fox News scary shit where they try to convince you that these people are like all gonna human traffic your whole family or whatever, and then you go out to a thing like that, it's washed away immediately and you realize that it's like no, these people are
Mm.
just like everyone else where they have like this fun artistic shit they do, and they are like you know all this shit about their like sexuality and stuff, but that's the same as in heteronormal culture. You know, it's an unfair thing to always be like, why is this drag queen so sexual? It's gonna traumatize my kid. It's like, well, you take your kid to Hooters, dude. Like, fucking, what's that? You know,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. And yeah, when you talk to the drag queen at a drag queen brunch show, or you talk to one of these insane chaos magic swinger clown people, it really gets that away from you. And yeah, I had a touch grass weekend, I guess. I got offline and I went to this shit, and I thought about that a lot, and it was like that's a good way to get people out of the fucking fascist culture war stuff too. Is
Yeah.
hey, go touch grass, go fucking meet the drag queen, you'll be fine. You know, you'll
Right.
be a human person. Anyways, do you want to talk about the way you're wearing this bandana, or do you want to comment on what I'm saying?
Well, I'm curious how many clowns you saw.
There were two.
Okay.
And there was a third guy I never saw. There was a third guy they kept referencing named Bonk. There was Mooney,
Bonk?
Moon, and Bonk. And I mentioned Bonk to someone, and they were like, "Oh man, fuck Bonk!" Like somebody had a. So, I don't know. Maybe it's good I didn't meet Bonk. But
Is Bonk non-binary?
I don't know at all.
That sounds like a name somebody would. Which that's quickly becoming a hack joke, and I'm trying to get in before it's totally just my pronouns are this. But non-binary names, get them while they're hot. Little jokes about that.
Sock. Yeah, I got you.
Sock, bonk.
Bonk. Yeah.
No, I feel what you're saying. What's that?
Do not misgender Bonk.
No, and I wouldn't. Which is actually that's why I asked. But the I really feel what you're saying about like comedy and physicality, because that really is what clown school is all about, is not finding humor in everything but words, figuring out where comedy comes from. That's not just set up punchline tag, like the way your body moves, the faces you're making, the expressions, the air in the room, all of those other things. I'm sure I've gone on and on about this in the past on the show, but my bandana, which is also part of, and this was my first clown teacher would always ask me, what clothes do you wear when you, because I started doing it when I was starting with stand-up. I did that and I took improv, because both of those things make you a better stand-up. And he would always ask me, what do you wear when you go on stage? Never really thought about it. I was like, I don't know, just my clothes. It was like, well, you should think about how people are going to see you. What outfit you're wearing is going to make a difference. It's going to have an impact on your set one way or another. But in any case, I am wearing a bandana. I'm trying to figure out how to wear it. I have been told that this is the summer of bandana. They've become acceptable for white boys such as myself to wear yet again. I got this one tonight. Earlier, I was at a Zoran Mamdani rally, and they're giving them out.
For anyone who is not watching the YouTube show, Anders is wearing his bandana Tupac style, which is very bold. And I want to just interject a point. If this is when bandanas became appropriate for men and white boys to wear and people like that, and there's something happening with bandanas, then that means we're ahead of the curve, because we sold bandanas as merch.
That's right. Ago. Which I used as a mask.
I did too in 2020.
Right. Which I guess you weren't supposed to do at the time. But
I didn't know back then.
Yeah. Yes, this is maybe I could wear it around my neck. I'm not very good at tying things, so I'll have to figure out some way for this to be part of my apparel.
If you wear it like that, you look either like Tupac or a Mother Goose, and there's a red line you gotta be careful with. If it sags to a certain extent, you look like a from a child's fairy tale.
I mean, that's the new Mother Goose core. It's a new thing.
Fair enough. All green lights.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. The clown tells me. Goose guy, get in here.
Yeah, this. I mean, this was packed. This thing where I got the bandana. And some context here. This is a rally that was announced. At least I heard of it 2 or 3 days ago. And this is New York City, Brooklyn Steel, which is a big ass music venue. Accommodates, I don't know, 1,000 people. I'm bad with figuring that stuff out, but a lot of people. MJ Lenderman played a set this past week, and I wonder if maybe something got in the works through that. The Zoomer hero to millennials, MJ Lenderman, which people don't know. What's that?
MJ Slenderman. That's what I was saying in my head.
MJ Slenderman, yes. He's a 20-something who is a great musician. He plays music for older people, which is kind of a Wilco situation. He's sort of the Barry Weiss of music, except he's not going for for boomers. I mean, I'm sure actually there are some boomers who like it. I sent it to my dad, and he was like, "This is good."
Sure. It's like folk
Uh,
music.
yeah, it's nice like indie rock, and he played a show this past week and had Zoran get up on stage and give a little speech, and maybe something got in the works there. I can't speculate on how this got set up, but they just announced a few days ago through like unofficial or like the channels of for supporters and volunteers, and that's who DSA members, for instance, that's who was contacted about it. And all these people came out on a rainy day with not that much notice. On Star Wars Day, May the 4th, people put down the Phantom Menace watch party and they came out to the Zoran rally at Brooklyn Steel, and it was awesome. It was totally packed. There was an endorsement before the show started, before the rally started, from Ella Emhoff, who was there. I don't think she spoke. I could be wrong. I was in line to get a pretzel, and the line was very long, and so eventually I abdicated from it. But that's a big deal. You got Ella Emhoff, who's endorsing before AOC or Bernie Sanders. Jean-Luc Mélenchon also has beat them out in coming out for Mr. Z, which I think at some point we're going to see an endorsement from Bernie or AOC, or not. Maybe they will be fulfill their roles as traitors to the cause and not weigh in on the mayoral election in New York. But really great event, and it I feel like this thing is going somewhere. For better or worse, he has a shot because nobody else has stepped up against the evil Andrew Cuomo. It's basically Zoran is the last guy standing.
Yeah, man. I can feel it from the other coast, man. I've been reading about it. It's exciting. He seems fucking great. I'm very interested to hear your takes as the fucking race goes on because I know, first of all, I know you love a goddamn mayor's race. Second of all, I know that you thought that running a DSA mayor wasn't the fucking move because of how mayorships and city politics work. So if they pull it off, that's got to be a moment to like stop and assess things and go, what's going to happen? This makes me
Right
from here on out.
Yeah, the way I look at it, there are kind of three paths, as it were. Which actually I didn't even intend this, but that actually sets up our guest nicely. The three paths. I see three paths for Zoran potentially. There is
The zonk, the bonk, the broom. I made up an extra one on actually.
Yeah, having a Z name lends itself to a lot of like fun little things like that. It's interesting. There's another candidate, Zelnor Myri, who literally same initials, which is not very common to be a ZM. But I see three paths. There's three sort of historical figures who we can look to. One is Morris Hillquit, I believe is his name. I wasn't expecting to say this, but so I didn't Google it. But Morris Hillquit was a socialist from the early 20th century who ran for mayor of New York a couple of times. One was in like a special elections, a minor thing, but he ran a very big race in 1918 against the war, or 1917, and he really served as a sort of a rallying cry, his campaign for the anti-war movement during World War I, which was being, like today, being really suppressed. They were getting people are getting arrested for just saying we should not have a world war. That's crazy. Don't do it. People are getting thrown in jail.
What year are you talking about?
1917.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, for sure. Eugene Debs and shit.
Yeah. Right. That same party, Morris Hillquit was a part of, and he did not win. Obviously, he was the Socialist Party did have seats here and there. They did have mayors in other places, but New York City, very uphill battle. So he did not win, but his campaign was really important. I think that is a scenario for Zoran where it becomes, and that's kind of why I support him in the first place, is like this is going to be a tribune campaign. This can bring people into the movement and kind of cohere the progressive forces in New York City, as well as the anti-war movement. Have that embedded within municipal politics, because the two are definitely connected. What's happening in Gaza now has a lot to do with urban politics throughout the country, and state politics as well. A lot of state city bonds wrapped up in Israel. There's also the I'll do a compliment sandwich. So I'll have the two good parallels on either end, and in the middle we have David Dinkins, who we've talked about on the show before. The last time
America loves
DSA, yeah, he was a member of DSA in the late '80s when he was elected, and then he did a crap job. He did not do well, as is really summed up by A Tribe Called Quest, which at first they were singing, "Mr. Dinkins, would you please be my mayor?" And then eventually, after he was mayor for a while and got booted out, they're like, David Dinkins was a shitty ass mayor. They were singing at concerts. He was undermined by the city council. The NYPD practically overthrew him. That is a possible outcome for Zoran. We have to be honest about that. And that was my main reservation, is like, what the hell happens if he wins? Because, it seemed unthinkable when he announced back in October. But he is the most powerful opposition to Adams and Cuomo. Nobody else has stepped up. And so it's possible that he actually wins. I still think that's better than Cuomo winning. Even to have a failed socialist mayor is better than a successful autocratic Cuomoite.
I'm not the step mayor. I'm the mayor that stepped up. That's what he'll say.
Yes, and Zoran actually made a good point about this, because he on Hassan's stream a few weeks ago, he was talking about this very issue, about how the left we look at things sometimes a little too strategically, and we think like, oh well, it's good for us as a movement if the people in power fail, if local governments and Democratic Party governments, they fail the people, then we can swoop in and save the day at some point in the future. And that kind of abdicates responsibility, because what happens in government is our problem as the left broadly construed, and we should take it seriously. And when we can make an impact and you can win, you should take that chance. In all likelihood, it'll be very hard. I mean, it definitely will be very hard. You could fail, but you could also have a vision of this is the third path, a sort of socialist Fiorello LaGuardia, who was a mayor during the New Deal era and was progressive, Italian American, and changed New York City. He transformed New York politics. He did enable Robert Moses, did a lot of bad stuff, but he was modernizing the city and bringing it into a new era, and really galvanizing a lot of public investment, and making it a more livable city. And we can potentially start the 21st century version of that. I mean, of course, whatever path Zoran goes down is going to be new, but these are some possibilities we can look to from the past that are going to inform the future. I have come around. I do actually hope he wins now, and I think it's going to be a fight if we're in power or out of power, and shooter's going to shoot. We have to aim for the top.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Like, I think that's a really good point that he made that you relayed. So good job relaying his point. But like the thing where if you wait for the opportunity to the moment of crisis to present itself, right? If you too much of an accelerationist about it, it's like, well, then you're still in a bad situation. Being like, okay, I'm going to answer everyone's. Everyone's looking at it now. Everyone's observing the moment. And I'm gonna, be the person that solves this. And as a leftist, your job is gonna be 10 times harder than everyone's all the time. It's way easier to be a fucking conservative in any way and just go like, don't blame me. It's the status quo, or
right,
or just rely on the status quo and shield yourself in it. you have to win by you just have to do everything 10 times harder. It's like I was talking to somebody about this the other night, while my brain was still sparkling with the galaxy swirling in it and everything. But it's like Batman, right? It's like it's him and the Joker are not just flip sides of each other in terms of like, well, I mean they are in some ways, but like the Joker's job is easier because he can kill people, right? Batman has to do everything by the book and has to not kill people, and that's what it is to be a leftist. Even though Batman is a fucking cop, this is like a bad metaphor, but like to be right, you're in a bad situation, and it doesn't matter how you got there, whether you seized this accelerationisty kind of moment or you just barreled through like Zoran's trying to do right now. You know, every fucking day you have to wake up and just fight a brick wall, so you might as well just do it.
Yeah.
Like, anywhere all the time, you know, throw a bunch of shit at the wall. So
Yeah.
that's my philosophy with the left often it comes up is just do everything. Like fucking there's no reason to overly strategize.
Yes. And that is a good segue actually into our interview, which is about strategy, but it's about how it is multi-pronged, or about how, you know, there are overlaps in left strategies for dealing particularly with climate, which is only getting worse. But we have a great guest to talk to us about what to do and what is left to do with this burning planet. And what do we do as people who are, many of us, anti-capitalist, and also just anybody who wants to stave off human extinction. This is someone who wrote a really good assessment of that question, Malcolm Harris. Let's go to that interview. Okay, cool. All right. We are now joined by Malcolm Harris, who is an author of a few different books, but the one we're talking about today is his most recent, What's Left? 3 Paths Through the Planetary Crisis. Malcolm, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And this is the first question is about the book, the color palette of the book, the gradient, because it is fairly similar to the gradient in your last book, Palo Alto, which has kind of a tie-dye vibe. This does as well. Is that a coincidence, or is this part of a theme you're getting at here?
I don't know about a theme. It's definitely some visual similarities. This one was supposed to evoke the sheen of oil on water, but blown out in sort of a, I think it was Easter colors these days, but not as saturated as the last one, which was supposed to evoke, a bunch of different things, including tie-dye, but not just tie-dye. I don't know. Maybe this will probably be my last multicolored one. Maybe the next one will be austere. We'll see.
Ah, well, that some people would be disappointed by that, but I'm very eager to see what the next colors in store are. This book is about the climate crisis. What inspired you to write it?
Well, I start with this conversation I had in 2019 when I was doing, of all things, some consulting for the Shell Oil Company, because my first book is about millennials. It's a materialist account of the millennial generation called Kids These Days. And I didn't know at the time that all generational writing is just advertising for consulting services.
Really?
Like everyone who does any sort of like generational writing, it's just what they're really doing is offering their corporate consulting services. And this is like their qualifications, which I didn't know. I was doing, I did it because I thought that was an interesting path of analysis. But what everyone else knows is that that's a corporate consulting trick. And so I end up getting invited by Shell Oil to go to London and do scenario planning exercises with like C-level Shell executives and talk about global warming with them. And they didn't make me sign an NDA. So I agreed to write a story about it for New York Magazine, which I did. And they were not super psyched about that, but tough luck. But what really stuck with me was what this one guy who was a financial analyst, a young guy, told me when I was asking about what happens to oil wells when they get decarbonized, quote unquote, decarbonized by Shell. And he tells me that they sell it, and they sell it to operators who are actually less accountable, less environmentally responsible. So actually, the well itself doesn't get decarbonized. The carbon intensity of the well, in fact, increases. And I asked him if he thought that was, much of an actual climate solution. And what he told me was, we don't plan to lose money. And that line really stuck with me because it's got like so many pieces to it. But this point of like, they're the ones doing the planning and they can't plan to lose money. So if this financial analyst planned to lose money, if he was like, we should cap these oil wells instead of selling them, he'd get fired. Or if his boss believed him, then he would get fired. Or if his boss's boss, the CEO themselves can be removed if they, plan to lose money. And yet we know that firms like Shell or whoever, countries themselves that are responsible for stewarding already discovered fossil fuel reserves have to plan to strand them, right? They have to plan not to burn already discovered reserves. And that means planning to lose money. And that's a slightly different problem than what we're usually encountering, because that's not just like one bad leadership or bad policy or like bad greedy CEOs or whatever. Because we find ourselves individually and collectively unable to plan to lose money, because that's how we arrange our society in the first place, is around not losing money. And so I wanted to write about the climate crisis from that understanding of what kind of crisis it was, not a crisis of like greed or irresponsibility, but of our social structure.
Yeah, and that story is in the introduction of the book, which is kind of a nice preamble to the main substance, which the three paths, the aforementioned paths, which are market craft, public power, and communism. Could you kind of summarize the three of those and how they work together?
Yeah. So my premise was that any sort of progressive solution to the climate crisis that isn't based on just, building higher walls and more guns or like going to Mars or whatever, was going to have to tackle this problem of an impersonal system that requires all of us to make ourselves valuable, and at the same time offers up fossil fuels as a really good way to make ourselves valuable, right? You get like a 1,000% energy return on fossil fuels. It's a really good way to do stuff. And doing stuff is one of the ways that we make ourselves valuable, and that's how we secure a living for ourselves as people in this world. And so any sort of progressive collective solution to this problem is going to have to solve some part of this, what I call the oil value life chain, is going to have to break some part of that equation. And so all three of these paths are different progressive agendas, but they all find ways to attack that chain. And so MarketCraft, the first one, attacks the connection between fossil fuels and value. It says, look, markets are a tool that people use, societies of people use to achieve the things that we want collectively. If we want to use it to achieve decarbonization, we can create suppressive rules for the fossil fuel industry, and we can encourage green technology and new forms of entrepreneurship and like market activity that encourage decarbonization. And so we've seen sort of stuff like this out of the Biden administration in the first years. That's what the IRA ultimately was, de-risking green programs, and at the same time making stuff harder for fossil fuel programs or fossil fuel agenda. So that's, you could think of it as like a liberal solution, but I was trying not to use like political identities to label the strategies, because I wanted people to try and think about them non-reactively, to really think through the arguments on their own account of themselves, not try and like figure out which is the one that, it's not a personality test. It's not like, a BuzzFeed quiz or whatever.
You might be MarketCraft if you, worked in the Biden administration, for instance.
Right. And I want people to like, blur the lines between them by really understanding the strategies on their own terms. So public power, the second strategy, says if we want to do something, we can use the state collectively to do it directly. We don't have to try and create a market structure and incentives for private players to accomplish the decarbonization that we need. We can use state programs to accomplish it directly. And public power is a bit of a pun because I'm talking about the power of the public and the working class in particular to achieve this collective agenda. But I'm also talking about publicly owned power utilities, right? Like the provision of power itself as a public service by the public, for the public, planned by the public, maintained by the public. And so the best example we have of that in the American context, and I'm not just using the American context, but I think maybe listeners might be more familiar, is the Tennessee Valley Authority, where under the New Deal, FDR said, look, if capital doesn't think it's worthwhile to electrify the South, then we'll do it directly. And we'll build the dams, and we'll build the power stations, and we'll build the distribution network to electrify, and then we'll maintain it collectively with a government agency on the public's behalf. And that's public power in both senses. And that's the second strategy. Now, the third strategy, which I call communism, and I did try different names. I tried drafts where it was like commoning, or
Commoning,
like
okay.
communityism, or
Yeah.
whatever, bullshit. If you add more syllables, then it's less scary, or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But ultimately, I decided that was dishonest, and that I trusted my readers to sort of get what I was talking about.
Right. You could also communalism might there might be a conservative sheen to some of the communitarian labels.
Yeah, well, maybe they can find something to like in communism too. I don't know. But the idea of communism is that we need to break the connection between value and life, reorganize life according to people's collective needs with our collective abilities in a planned way, based on analyzing our needs in an individual and collective way as a collectivity, as a community of people. With the acknowledgement that one thing we all need is decarbonization, and that we're having trouble fulfilling that need in a system where needs are individualized and fed through a market value system. So one thing when I was touring and talking about this book, I was telling audiences of people that, like, the question, how many shoes do the people in this room need, asked under a value system, is not a question about feet. It's a question about how much our individual time is worth, what priority we put on how many shoes we want, the labor conditions for the shoe market, what kind of labor our price our labor commands versus the price of labor for shoemakers, what quality of shoes we want, et cetera, et cetera. All these questions that have nothing to do with how many feet we have, too, which is like actually a really relevant aspect of the question. And so decarbonization, we're treating as this sort of like market value, like, oh, I can get like goods that have decarbonization as a feature of the product that I buy or something, that treats it as something individual that we can purchase with our labor through the system, without acknowledging that, like, we all have to live on a planet, and that we share an atmosphere, and that we have a common need for decarbonization that has to take precedence over things that are less crucial for our lives, right? And that we can like make that collective determination that one thing is more important than another collectively on our collective behalfs. But we can only do that if we can break this connection between value and life, because otherwise people are going to fight for the chance to survive, even if that means working at an oil well that is flaring excess methane, into the atmosphere, because that's the best job they can get. So those are the three strategies, and there's like overlapping aspects of them, and there are people working at all the different. You think of them as like a Venn diagram, but this is like the progressive field as I see it, and that's what I wanted to map with the book.
Yeah, it was interesting how, like, obviously you are a partisan of one of these strategies, and I'll tell listeners it's not the market craft one, but you do take a very ecumenical approach to each of them. It kind of felt like, in a way, an ecological approach, like they can complement one another. It did sort of remind me too of, there's a belief in American politics very commonly held that people, divided government is good because the two teams batting it out against each other will come up with the best solution. But you're not calling for a popular front approach to just as you said, just kind of line up behind the most conservative policies. But there are still, as you said, ways in which these three strategies can overlap. What are some of those ways?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways and different levels that we can think about. And so one of the examples that I talk about, like at the state level, is that the People's Republic of China has done a really good job combining market craft and public power. Not a democratic public power, but that's sort of not a requirement of the strategy, right? Of using public institutions and crafting playing field for private actors as in relation to those public institutions to become the world leader in the production of decarbonization tools. And that doesn't just mean, you know, cars and solar panels. It also means like trees and pump storage hydro facilities and like many other things that we need in order to build a decarbonized world, not just you know, a successful capitalist economy or whatever. You know, we often talk about it as just a like productive achievement, building X number of electric vehicles where the United States has failed to do so. But the afforestation program in particular, reforestation and afforestation, I think is a good model of the ecological concerns of the society, where they're able to put other values above economic values in terms of how they're planning things. So that's a good example of that overlap. But then I also talk about like really micro examples. I give an example of some workers at a power plant in the US who decided to start planting chestnut trees on the grounds of the power plant. And these are, you know, literal workers within the power system, right? These are public power workers who have decided that they are going to pursue their like passion for ecology and think ecologically about the other species that live in the power around the power plant and how they can like build a community to supply them in the future with the things they're going to need. Which I thought was a really striking example, because we often when we talk about public power, we talk about workers pursuing their interests as workers, you know, talk about fighting for better wages and fighting for more say over where the plants are going to operate or working conditions. But this is an example of public power overlapping with the sort of communal concern for our actual needs and planning for those as well, even though it's happening at a workplace. To say that like actually we also need, I've been researching these trees and we need to plant a bunch of chestnut trees, and I can enlist my coworkers in this communist project of building a food forest around my workplace. And there are a bunch of different examples of that in the book, and I detail at every sort of intersection point how people are pursuing overlapping points of overlap within these strategies.
Right, and public power in particular, the point about workers is very relevant, because there have been, I think, two major obstacles to implementing things like the Build Public Renewables Act in New York, which the lack of support from a lot of unions, namely ones that represent energy workers, as well as obstinate politicians like Kathy Hochul, who signed the bill but doesn't seem very enthusiastic about implementing it. How can those contradictions be resolved? And is there a way in which public power can be aided by more militant activity from, say, communists?
Yeah, definitely aided and have found overlaps between those social forces, not just the like day-to-day practices of individuals. Yeah, so one example I think I talk about in the book is the like battle in Seattle against the WTO, where you had you know, the craziest anti-civilization anarchists, you know, working side by side with very organized union members who both saw their common opposition to a capitalist trade program and really worked to back each other and use their different like skills and abilities, where the anarchists would go take risks and shut stuff down, and then union members were able to use their political connections and their role within the system to like threaten a strike in order to get those anarchists out of jail. Is a good example in the US context of what like people helping each other looks like. But you're right that workers have these contradictory interests. That workers have their interests as workers within their workplace, and they also have interests as members of the broad working class within a planetary society that's in crisis. So one of the examples I talk about of that is not just the opposition to the Build Public Renewables Act, but an opposition to a ban on gas-powered Bitcoin mines in New York State. And this is where like Kathy Hochul was on the right side and the construction unions were on the wrong side because they wanted the jobs that come with building these facilities. And that's understandable and real, right? Their interests there are specific. Those are specific jobs, and we can't just like imagine that there's a replacement for that job that might not exist. Might not exist with the same benefits. It might not exist with the same kind of rewards. And so those are particular people who rely on particular jobs. At the same time, we can recognize that gas-powered Bitcoin mines are in opposition to our collective interests as people who live on this planet, right? Unless you're one of the few people who profit from Bitcoin mining, which is really just like a direct engine of class domination, right? It's like the only thing it's used for is making rich people richer, which is, again, contrary to the working class's broad interests. It's like the worst planning you could possibly imagine for society. And at the same time, we have these unionized workers who are supposed to represent society as a whole, representing instead themselves in their own very like narrow parochial interests within the system.
Right. If we could return to MarketCraft for a moment, it was interesting to read. It seems like a really good example of how neoliberalism, which is obviously a very fraught term, but neoliberalism is not just about getting the government out of the way to make room for markets, but using the state to facilitate markets and as well as create them in the first place. Where does the term MarketCraft come from?
The term MarketCraft comes from this political scientist named Stephen Vogel. And I think it's a really useful term to think about progressive uses of the market, which again, we saw some examples of during Biden's first term, first years. Sorry, that's a slip that I keep making. I wonder why.
I mean, he could still come back. He's eligible.
Come back, it's true, just like Trump did. That's a good point. So that's why I'm talking about it that way. We saw some like really like left-wing MarketCraft theorists make some inroads into the Democratic Party at the highest levels during those years, and I think really affected policy. So even though I'm not I'm not a liberal, but I gave MarketCraft the fairest shake I could, and I think there's some real arguments there that everyone on the left should be familiar with. And it starts with the basic concept of MarketCraft, which is to view markets again as a tool of societies of people, rather than as some like ancient god we have to appease, or like the secret of human nature, or the true organizing principle of society, or any of these things. It's a very like it's a set of tools that societies of people can use to accomplish our collective goals. And when you start thinking about it that way, it opens up a whole different way of looking at the relationship between these actors, because suddenly it's like, well, if we want full employment, let's pursue full employment policies. What does that look like? If we want a decarbonized society, we can jam that lever all the way if we want to. And again, we sort of see what that looks like in the People's Republic, right? In China, where they've jammed some MarketCraft levers, a bunch of different MarketCraft levers, right? Including on chip design and stuff like that, but also like electric car batteries, where we've seen just insane, really like unexpected progress out of the country. And that's because they have, as a society, decided, all right, we're going to jam this lever all the way and view markets as tools that we're going to use. And that includes like, we will disappear the billionaire head of a social media company if you start interfering, and if you stop believing that we are the ones who pull the strings, society itself pulls the strings. If you start thinking that you are independent of the MarketCraft choices that we've made, if the market starts trying to craft society, then like you can go away. Like no one's not dependent on you.
Yeah. Well, this did make me want to ask, though. You mentioned the Biden administration, and of course, the Inflation Reduction Act is kind of the crown jewel of those 4 years. Is there anything, just looking at in raw science, climate change? You know, it's obviously getting worse and worse and worse. Is there anything in there that is salvageable and will actually help? Instead of continuing on 2021 till today as if there was nothing passed, like, is there anything in the IRA that is salvageable?
People are still fighting for whatever scraps they can get their hands on. I mean, it's honestly that's yet to be decided, right? Like I think there's a decent chance that the Trump assault of these first couple months that we've seen gets rolled back. At the same time, I think there's some real damage that's been done, long-term damage already, because if you're talking about market craft and incentivizing private players to invest large amounts of money based on their perception of a stable government and like promises about tax incentives or programs or whatever, they've already been burned, right? Anyone who invested big money based on IRA promises, based on what they got, assuming that the Biden administration's achievements were going to continue, they got burned, right? They've already been burned. It's not like we're going to see if they get burned. Like they're already in trouble. Whether they've been able to make their debt payments or whatever, like their business models are shot. And that's going to make it really hard for people to make that same investment again, right? They're going to look back and say, well, look at what happened for people who fell for it last time. I can't convince my board, or I can't convince investors, or, my stock's going to take a hit or whatever. It's going to be hard for the private players within the market craft strategy to do their part.
Right. And does that open the door for the other two strategies, just the failure of market craft? Because, they had their day, they had their chance, and it seems like it hasn't lasted very long.
I wish I could say that, right? But I think the truth is that there's been a right-wing offensive in this country, and not just in this country, but in a number of countries around the world. And that has damaged the left across the board. So we've seen not just hits on the public power strategy or on the market craft strategy, but absolutely on the public power strategy, right? We've seen direct attacks on federal workers, which is sort of the last bastion of unionism within the United States in the first place. Not to mention the people who actually operate public power installations. We've seen attacks on the administration of literal public power administrations. So that includes like the TVA and the Bonneville Power Agency have both been, their boards have been attacked by the Trump administration. And now I'm not sure they have quorum to even operate. So they also need workers, right, who are going to apply for those jobs. Even if those get restored, even if those programs get brought back, a lot of the appeal of those jobs was that something like this wouldn't happen. So now you're going to have to convince a bunch of skilled workers that like it's not only like okay to work for the government again doing public power stuff, but like still be willing to do that, right? Still be willing to take the like pay hit or whatever to work a federal job doing decarbonization, doing climate work, whatever, and just knowing that if you like lose a coin flip every 2 or 4 years, like this is acceptable behavior from the government, that they might like just fire you or destroy your program or suspend your grant or whatever. So we are also going to need people to cooperate in that strategy in a way that it's going to be hard to convince them to plan for. And I wish that means that like, all right, now it means like the revolutionary strategy is the only one left and like, things are better there. But the use of like deportations in particular is a real classic anti-red strategy, and their ability to target people who are involved in left-wing organizing and remove them from their rights, and then in that rightless situation, remove them from the country. Is terrifying. And so I think that the radical left has taken a serious hit as well, and people are rightly afraid as a result. So No, I think we've seen like a real advance by the right in this period, which is I write about in the book, right? And I think it's funny. People are like, "Oh, do you wish you'd known that like Trump was going to get elected?" And I was like, it's not like I didn't think it was possible for a like right-wing petro-capitalist to get elected in the United States, like many have been elected around the world, which I write about.
Right.
Like, if you didn't think it could happen, that could happen here again. Like, it just happened 4 years ago. You know,
Yeah.
I find it funny that people are like, "Oh, are you shocked?" Or you like, "Would you have written the book differently?" I was like, "Of course, that was one of the things that was possibly going to happen." But I don't think we can be like reactive that way in how we're doing our analysis and our thinking.
On that point, though, I'm not a science person. I'm very close to scientifically illiterate. But obviously, what Biden did was not enough to really fulfill any of these strategies. Um, how bad is Trump going to make things? Like, will that like on a carbon scale, like is there any hope, I guess, after he's gone? Because he's going to be gone one day. But just how much damage can he do, and is he already doing? And scientifically, what are we going to need to do to make up for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's funny, the effects of the Trump administration in overall carbonization have been mixed so far, right? The direct ones. Part of the reasons that the economic policy has led to a falling price of oil, which has led to people stopping oil production. Because when prices fall, there are some oil
Yeah.
fields that are not worth exploiting anymore.
Kind
So
of like his tariff against Israel is
right,
like accidentally based.
right. So now we have like oil production going down that has gone down, even though he's pro oil production or whatever, because it's just not how things work, right? So like yeah, I think the like reversal of tendency towards the elimination of coal plants in the U.S. is like bad. But I don't think like coal plants that are going to start working again because of the Trump administration in the United States are not a like major contributor to global carbon emissions, right? So in that way, I think that it's a little bit of a red herring to think like, oh, because Trump, all is lost. I think it's the damage to world progressive forces that are actually trying to solve these problems uh, that are among the most threatening aspects of the Trump administration, is that they're suppressing our ability to actually try to solve these problems, which is what the urgent need is.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's we can't put everything on the president of the United States as much airtime as that figure gets. Um, some one thing I wanted to ask about is indigenous societies come through as a theme in the book. Obviously, there's a lot we can learn from ecological planning from them, but are there points at which action on climate change, building the necessary resources to decarbonize, can sometimes come into tension with indigenous communities?
Absolutely, and does all over the world for a number of reasons. There are 500 million indigenous people all around the world. This is not a question of the United States and Canada and Australia settler colonies, and then the rest. We still have some Indians or whatever. It's there in indigenous societies around the world, and a lot of them live near a lot of resources, unexploited resources, as well as biodiversity resources, because indigenous societies are numerically and statistically much better at maintaining biodiversity in the places where they live than settler societies and capitalist societies made around capitalist social metabolism. So it's not just about like, oh, we can learn or whatever, but it's about you can't destroy the world in its generality in its particularity to fix it in its generality, right? You can't like it's not Sim City. You can't be like, oh, we'll just put all the solar panels in the desert and we'll put all the windmills in like the seashore, and then we'll use all the energy from there and we'll just like destroy those places. The world is many overlapping ecological cycles. It's not just like one system that you can abstract like that. And we can't forsake knowledge about those particular systems as it's been maintained in spite of global capitalism. We really need that understanding. There's a lot of knowledge there, and it's not knowledge that's being maintained into the present, and activities that are being undertaken by contemporary societies, not historical societies, right? And I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about indigenous peoples in the world, we're talking about contemporary societies, not historical societies, who are dealing with the problems of today in the same way that we all are. So those conflicts do exist, and I don't think there's a like way to solve them in a like systematic answer that we can just pick and say like, oh, we need to hew to this at all times. We need to look at ways in which these are settled in practice. So one example I talk about is in the Hawaiian island of West Kauai. There's a pump storage hydro facility, which is an energy storage facility being built. And West Kauai is one of the most advanced in terms of renewable energy sources in the world. It's on sunny days, it's entirely renewable. And there are a lot of sunny days on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. But storage is important. And so they're building a storage facility that uses reservoirs of water that's connected to the water system in the island, at least was the plan. But there were a lot of indigenous farmers and agriculturalists and fisher people who said, you don't want to use these old colonial era irrigation ditches, this irrigation system that was built for colonial era farms, because you're going to wash all the old pesticides into the water system. And we don't have enough farms to use this fresh water right now. And so you're going to waste all this fresh water and contaminate the seabed with all these historical pesticides. And this was a conflict that raged for years, where you had these people who were blocking this clean energy project because they were pointing to the other ways in which it was ecologically destructive. But ultimately, they agreed on a project that was smaller and that didn't use these irrigation ditches, and now it's being built. And so it's not a question of like, oh, we just shouldn't do it. It's a question of incorporating that knowledge into the actual plans that we make, because it's important. Like these questions are like getting the right answer is actually important, not just in abstracted terms of just like energy, carbon, period, or whatever. These systems matter.
Right. Well, you used a term just now that I wanted to make sure to ask about: social metabolism. What does that term mean to you?
Great question. So we live in the capitalist mode of production, and we think of ourselves as living in a mode of production because capitalism is the mode of productionist mode of production of all time. We're focused on production as a cycle, and that's the way that the system perpetuates itself, and it's how we all make our living, is by producing things and selling them, or living off the system that produces things and sells them. And we think of all societies in the past as having modes of production, even though that's not how they actually existed, right? But from our perspective, that is. But production isn't the only thing that matters in the world. There's also reproduction, there's maintenance, there's waste management, and all of these are important cycles as well. And our mode of production, with its production focus, has a really hard time addressing these other cycles. In fact, it finds it useful to ignore them a lot of the time. And so we need a perspective that incorporates not just production, which is still important. Obviously, we need to produce energy and a bunch of other stuff as well. But also these other questions, right? Decarbonization is a waste management problem. We have a really, really big waste management problem that we probably shouldn't be treating as a problem of production. And yet, if we think in this mode of production perspective, we're like, oh, we just need to produce the right decarbonization machine and that'll solve the problem, right? Because all we can do is produce, because it's a mode of production system. When actually what we need is a waste management and a more ecological reproductive system, and we need to think about all sorts of these other cycles. But to do that, we need to pull this sort of social metabolic perspective from a better future society that is actually concerned equally with all of these cycles, and apply it to our capitalist system that is only concerned with the mode of production. And so that's one of the reasons when people are like, social metabolism, like, what is that? What does that mean? How can I even think of that? And it's because it's out of place with where we are, right? It doesn't really belong to a society that's focused so instrumentally on production. But we need that kind of perspective that thinks about reproduction and waste and maintenance and all these other cycles. And when we apply it, it shows how out of whack we are, right? And how broken all these cycles are.
Right, and it's a concept that is alien to the writers of a book that, in my mind, is kind of the evil twin of what's left, and that's Abundance, which I assume there was no coordination, that you didn't mean to release them at the same time. But you did write a review recently of Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. How did writing What's Left inform your review of Abundance?
A lot. Yeah, that was definitely gave me the material to think about what that perspective is, because I think both books are supposed to be dealing with the same question, right? Which is, how do we get from where we are now in a moment of crisis to a society where we've solved this crisis, right? And they're not just talking about climate, or even mainly talking about climate. But in some ways, I'm not either. That I might be mainly talking about climate, but I'm talking about the social system as a whole, and I think they're trying to as well. But they're not really aware that they're doing that. I guess in some ways, that they treat this as a question of objects rather than a question of social relations, to a certain degree, or like our social relations just need to change to better serve the objects, and then we'll be in a better place. And I think that's like a fetishistic way to look at it, right? Ultimately, this is a question of how we arrange our society, and that we have to change that. There's no sort of shortcut to abundance. Abundance has gotta come the sort of hard way, or one of the hard ways.
Yeah. Well, rounding out here, both books have been kind of conflated by Adam Tooze, we call him Adam Choose on the show, who wrote a review of your book in the New York Times, where he kind of conflates them as both sort of naive, like Biden era thinking, dreaming of a world that we can't possibly imagine now under Trump, and he calls for just focusing on our civic institutions, which was kind of a depressing note to me. As we're closing out here, can you kind of make the case for imagination, for envisioning a better world, and what to do with power, even though we may not actually get it?
Yeah, well, I think we can find places to exercise leverage now, and to fight for power now, even without $1 billion, and even without control of the Democratic Party. And that's where I end the book for sure, is like, what are some models or structures that we can start building today across the left as progressives, in order to start building power in this moment and preparing for a really disaster-full situation, and to prevent it from being as disastrous as it is currently set to become. I'm not a depressive person. That was the sort of vibe I got from the Tooze review. It didn't seem like much of an engagement with the book, which I thought was a pity, but I guess maybe that shows the limits of the author, I guess. I'm not familiar with his work.
Or the New York Times, maybe.
Well, I mean, look, the Times has plenty to answer for, but I don't think they were trying to take me out by signing Tooze the book. I think he chipped his tooth on it, right? I think he had trouble placing it or understanding it, or I don't think the idea that he was going to find some place in between me and Ezra Klein and sort of fold us over in some sort of horseshoe or whatever, it didn't work. I don't think the review was a good piece of writing. I don't think it offered people much. I don't think he's even posted it or promoted it. It just sucks that this is in this media environment, that's like what you get.
Yeah, just shots fired, without a ton of substance. Well, Malcolm Harris, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, wherever fine books are sold. I hope. Check out What's Left: 3 Paths Through the Planetary Crisis.
Cool. We will link to that in the show description. All right. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for having me, Anders.
Yep. All right. That was my interview with Malcolm Harris. Really interesting stuff. Something I wanted to mention before we're doing we're recording on May 4th. This has been Star Wars Day I don't remember hearing about this until like 10 years ago, but it's been a thing for a long time. Do you know the first recorded use of May the 4th be with you?
I learned this literally earlier today, but please tell us all.
This is a feather in the cap for those sci-fi nerds who believe that it is Star Wars that is the reactionary pablum, not Star Trek. But it was one. It was actually the Conservative Party in the UK, which put a little ad in the newspaper on May 3rd, 1979, when Thatcher was running for prime minister. And the ad said, "Dear Maggie, may the 4th be with you." It feels like I have a lisp when I say just that sentence. May the 4th be with you. It doesn't it?
Esther the cat is.
Yeah. What is just because there's 2 THs in a quick sequence. But this was like they were hoping that she was going to win. And so it was like an ad from Conservative Party workers to their boss, Margaret Thatcher, like an aspirational, we hope that by the time the girl reading this is the prime minister.
Man, I don't even want to get into Star Wars because there's like shit happening right now where like the Trump people are posting like AI images of Trump with a lightsaber and stuff, and they're like, the real rebellion is, is us, and the woke people are the empire, and like, I don't know. I'm not going to insult our audience's intelligence here. We all know that Star Wars is about the Viet Cong, right? Like George Lucas is still alive. It's just insane to like watch people not get that when you can just go ask him. He's still alive. He's around. He'll tell you exactly what the fuck metaphor he was going for, and it's just been bastardized so much. But I do think Margaret Thatcher would make a good Star Wars character, like an Empire, officer or whatever. She'd be like a really good boss in like a video game where she has like what would her special like weaponry be, because she's the Iron Lady and she's like there's no alternative, and then she has like
she has a heart of iron where no turmoil or human suffering will bother her. Her heart is impenetrable. She can withstand the most.
Iron heart. Oh, she's got a crazy suit of armor. That would work for her. I was trying to think of like a new type of lightsaber, because every once in a while they do that. We're like, this guy's got 3 or whatever. But yeah, no, it's more that she's got massive defense and she's like really hard to take down. Yeah. That I could deal with.
And she's totally does not care about human suffering. That in a way is a superpower. And sometimes I admire conservatives for their ability to just not give a damn about who lives and who dies.
Yeah, well, they need to take mushrooms and go to the swingers fucking clown Ren Fair, in my opinion. That'll get them out of that shit.
Indeed. Well,
hey, if you enjoyed the show, and you like the show and you want to support us so we can keep making it, please consider signing up for our Patreon. It helps fund the show. We also have bonus episodes and a Discord, and we did a really good theory episode this last week I'm sorry, man, it took everything I had. We got into like Lacan and stuff like that, and yeah, I'm pretty proud of it, so please check out that if you like the show. And I don't have any other plugs personally. I'm just hanging around. I'm in LA. I might have shows. I can't remember. I'm still high on mushrooms.
Yes, that is our some of our best clown work. I guess verbal clown work is what we did behind the paywall with friends of the show, Alex Colliard and A.M. Gitlitz, talking about theory. It was a joke. In case there were some people who were confused.
I don't know what you're about it. I think it was very serious. I think we got a lot of work done.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. Was that not a joke? Interesting.
I was serious. Were you joking?
Okay.
Oh my god.
No comment. If check out The Vanquished, which is my other podcast. We got a YouTube channel, a lot of good episodes. Just did one about Scoop Jackson. And also, if you're in Jersey City, got a show May 10th. I'm helping raise money for some DSA candidates there. Saturday, May 10th. I'll put a ticket link in the description. Seacrest out.
Seacrest out this week. Fine. Let's change it up. Seacrest finish.